Okay, thanks everybody for joining us. I think we'll get underway. We are taping this. We fully intend to make this available to the membership afterwards. If somebody was joining us late or after, we can see if we can get that shared so people can check it out. So if you do miss the first few minutes, you can do that for things afterwards. Welcome to our hosts from Forest Lands Natural Resources. Caitlin, I think, is going to do most of the presenting, but she has some of her team, Ellie, Jared, and Linda on board to help with other questions and things down the road. So without further ado, I will pass that over to them. Questions we'll kind of hold and take the questions at the end. They can be put in the chat box. At the bottom, you can click chat and send the questions directly to me or to the whole group, and I will ask them afterwards. Or you can raise your hand and I can turn it over so you can have your voice and say your question when the time comes at the end. So I'll pass it over to you, Caitlin.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this overview and demonstration of the Trapping Harvest Report. Like Tim said, I'm Caitlin Sherman. I'm the acting manager of the data and licensing section while Pam Martins is away. And in my previous role, I was a wildlife biostatistician with the wildlife branch. I'm just going to quickly introduce the team members again. So we have Elle Street joining us. She's the senior policy analyst who spearheaded the regulatory side of the trapping report. Linda Deschamps, who's a business transformation analyst, and she'll be doing the demo for us tonight. And Jared Hales, who is the acting manager of the wildlife management section and previously the small game specialist. So I'm going to keep the presentation itself pretty short because I think the demo is kind of the main part of tonight's meeting. So we'll just give a quick overview of the transformation project, the wild system, and then the Trapper Harvest report, and then hand it over to Linda. So the Fish and Wildlife Transformation Project is an ongoing project to modernize authorization and reporting processes and to improve legislation compliance and data quality. This is a multi-year, multi-phase project that has been going on for about 5 years so far, with the various components being added over the course of that time. One of the main pieces of the transformation project is the WILD system, which is the Wildlife Information and Licensing Data System. Currently, the system has a number of different components and functionality in it, which include the Fish and Wildlife IDs, which were brought over from the old hunter numbers, hunting and species licenses, limited entry hunting applications and authorizations for the LEH draw, permits to accompany non-resident hunters and the associated reporting, guide outfitter licenses and reporting, guiding territory certificate management, compliance that goes along with all these pieces under the Wildlife Act, and most recently the Trapper and Harvest report that went in this past summer. And we also have a number of planned components that will be going in over the next several years. The most recent one on the horizon is the hunting compulsory reporting being transformed and put into the WILD system. That's just the hunting component, not the trapping component of compulsory reporting. After that, there'll be compulsory inspection. We're looking at trapping licensing and trapline registration, and then other commercial permits and the angling side of things. So it's a pretty big system, lots of things already there and lots of things to come over the next couple of years. Talking specifically about the Trapping Harvest report, the main purpose of the report is to address some data collection and data issues to help improve species management. Previous to this report coming in, the data was collected through the fur trader monthly reports, the royalty reports, and through compulsory inspection and compulsory reporting. The purpose of this report is to improve the time between harvest and report so that we have the data for timely management and timely decisions, making sure that we can attribute specific harvest to the specific trap line rather than being unsure or having harvest reported across multiple trap lines and areas. Some issues with the compulsory reporting program and a lack of awareness around some of the changes to compulsory reports and the species under that, as well as capturing unused furs that were harvested through the trapping program. So those are some of the things that we're aiming to address with this report. And the reporting requirements start for this current trapping license year, which is 2021-22, ending on June 30th, 2022, so this coming June. So that's the first year that this report is required. Any harvest from previous years, harvest from before July 1st, 2021 does not need to be reported on. All licensed trappers will be required to submit a report annually within 31 days of the end of the trapping license year. So by July 31st of following a year that a trapper is licensed, this report will need to be submitted, and it can be done electronically through the wild system, and that's what Linda will be showing us later. It can be reported on the paper reporting form, either submitted or mailed to Front Counter or mailed to the Wildlife and Habitat Branch. Or it can be done in person at a Front Counter BC office. So there's a couple different ways that it can be submitted to us. A trapper can choose to submit multiple reports throughout the year. So you can submit, monthly reports, quarterly reports, semi-annual reports, or you can submit just one report for the whole year at the end. Just one or more reports is required as long as you're not double reporting. And even if no harvest has occurred in a license year, the report is still required, just saying, no harvest has occurred this year. One piece that is required from a system perspective as part of this is that the trappers will need to have a Fish and Wildlife ID. The vast majority already do. So it's not an issue, and as if anyone does not currently have a FWID, you can reach out to Front Counter, and there's some guides online that will show you how to create one. And finally, for the requirements, compulsory reporting is still required for species under the regulation. There have been no changes to the Trapper CR program as part of implementing this report. That does mean that in those cases where harvest has occurred that require CR, there will be multiple reporting requirements, but we will be reviewing the programs, both CR and this trap and harvest report, to see, over the next year or two, to see how this rolls out and how we can make improvements to streamline to reduce that need for multiple reporting. So data collected through the report will include the Trapper Fish and Wildlife ID, the license year and license number, and whether the trapper harvested during the license year. If a trapper did not harvest, this report is still required, but this is the end of the information collected, just saying, no, I did not harvest. If the trapper did harvest, the harvest details include the trap line number, or saying, there was no trap line number, this was on private property, the month the harvest occurred, the species, the management unit, how many of the species by sex, so how many males, females, or unknown, and the park name and park use permit number if the harvest occurred in a park. Well, that's all the information that's being collected. And the last piece I'll cover before handing it over to Linda is around compliance. So there's two components of compliance for this report. The first is if a trapper has not submitted a report by July 31st following the end of the trapping license year, they'll be ineligible to perform fish and wildlife transactions until the report is submitted. That includes applying for and receiving licenses, authorizations, permits, and certificates. That piece comes into effect at the end of this license year, so starting August 1st, 2022. If a licensed trapper has not submitted a report by that date, this ineligibility will come into effect. The second piece is a fine. So if a trapping report hasn't been submitted, the trapper may be subject to a fine, but this isn't coming into effect until the end of the next license year to allow for everyone to kind of get used to and familiar with the process first. So that's the final piece. And the next part here is the demo from Linda. Just have to figure out how to send it over to her.
Well, I can share my screen.
Okay.
Yeah, or try. All right. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
There. Yep. Now we can see the wild system.
Okay. So what I've done is I've already logged into my profile on the public online, BC Hunting Online, using the BCEID. And when you log in, this is where you're taken. So like we mentioned, trapping licenses, application and issuance is not in the system at this time. So we follow the same procedure for getting trapping licenses. However, once the license is issued, the permit clerk will enter some information into the wild system, which will allow you to submit trapping reports from the public site. So if you wanted to see if your profile had your trapping license on file, you would come down to this option on the left-hand side menu, commercial licenses, and you'd click on that, and there you go. And just to let you know, I am in the test environment. It is a little bit slower than our public environment, so there may be a slight delay. So after clicking on commercial licenses, I'm in the current commercial license pane, and this is the trapping license I have on file. And when I click on this license number ID, a pop-up window is displayed, and this is the minimal information we need in our system for you to submit your report. So it just gives you the issued trapping license that you get on your license. The system will auto-generate an electric license, but you will be recording reports right now against the license the permit clerk, the license number the permit clerk gives you, and it gives you the term and status, etc. So that's where you can see what your license is on your profile. If you have an expired license, if you clicked on your show history, it would show you your current licenses as well as any expired license you had. And to get back to the current license, you just hide your history. So that's just viewing the minimal license information we have in the system. So we're going to submit a trapping report. So this under reports, you go to trapping. And so again, here, this show history, if you look at it, it will show all licenses that you have and licenses, it will show you trapping reports you've submitted for current and or previous license years. And the current will only show you what is for the current trapping license year. So our production site where you will be entering your trapping reports has the license year 2021-22. For my testing purposes, I asked that we have an additional license year come in. So you'll see a difference, but it won't be in production where you guys will be doing your trapping reports. So we're going to be selecting the trapping license year. I am going to select 21-22, and I'm going to say, did any harvest occur? Yes. So based on the trapping license year you select here, the system will produce the license number that you're going to set this report on. And so once you've entered this information, you click next, and it'll take you where you add your harvest data information. So this is where you're going to, this is for harvests only. So you're going to add a harvest information row. And if you tried to click harvest information row again, it's going to give you an error message because you have to fill all mandatory fields in before you can add a second row. So you're going to indicate in the drop down whether this was a private property or registered trap line. We'll start with registered trap line. Once you select that, then you are required to enter a trap line number. So you can just start entering your number, and as you start typing, it'll decrease, the options that you need to put, and then you'll just be able to select what trap line number you want. You select your month. So I'll just do January. You select your species, your MU. And so again, if you put a 3 in there, it should go down to the 3s, and then you're able to select whatever MU you want, or you can type the number in. You can report all for males, females, unknown for January at one time, but there has to be at least one or more in at least one or more boxes. So I can put 1, 0, 0 if I wanted to, or I could put 25 and 0. So at least you have to have something in there. It has to be, one of these boxes has to have at least 1, the others could be 0. If you select a harvest in a park and you say yes, then mandatory park name is required, and you can just start typing the name, and it should produce the drop down where you can just pick any park that you want, and then you enter your park use permit number. So all the information is displayed. I can add a new harvest row, and you can add as many harvest rows as you need or want to. You can again report once a month, you can report once a year, quarterly. There's no limit to the number of rows that you can add. So we will do private property for this one. And this is not information we require. Again, choose your month, your species, where it was the MU it was in, and we can just enter whatever numbers these are. And this time we'll say there's no, it wasn't in a park. So you can continue on adding harvest information rows. Once you've added everything you want to add, you click next. And so this is just confirmation that you've got everything you wanted to put in here and it is correct information. If it's not, you can click back and you can adjust one of these rows, or you can add more rows or remove one. So I can update any one of these rows or delete it or add more information. All those fields are open again. You complete your attestations. And then you submit your report. So at this point, you can then either enter another report, or you can return to your profile homepage. I'll show you how to enter as a no harvest report. So we'll enter another report, and I'll choose the same license year, and I will choose no this time. At this point, when you choose no, there's no further information required. I do the attestation. If I decided to change my mind and say, oh, yes, I did have a harvest, I can change it and do yes. It'll update, you click next, and you would add your harvest information rows, just like we just did. So I'll continue with a no, and I'll submit this. So now both reports have been submitted. I can either return to the profile or hit the home button. And so here are the reports that I submitted. These are the 2 I had submitted for this license year. And I still have the 1 report when I hit show history in the history pane. I show the 1 I submitted 2021. It also shows the 2 I submitted right now. You can look at the report from hitting the report ID on either the history or there's the current pane. I will open one up. And this is what the no history, there's nothing, it just shows who the trapper information is, that it was a no harvest and when it was submitted. If I choose one that had harvest, it shows all of the same information, that it was a harvest this time. It shows the information you entered and that was submitted to in the system. And that's all there is to creating the reports. You can create as many as you want. Again, you can do it once a month, however you need to do it, but that's all there is to submitting reports. Any questions? Anything somebody wants to see something again?
I've seen a couple of questions come in. So one, maybe the first one that I could go through is if, you know, you've submitted a no report, so say June or July, most of us don't trap in June and July. So do we have to do a no report for each of those months, or can we, is there a way to just kind of say, no, we're done for the year, please close our license, we're finished reporting?
Elle, do you want to talk to that?
I can speak to it. So no, if you haven't reported for the entire license year, you only need to submit 1 report. You don't have to submit, you know, no, I didn't hunt in July, no, I didn't hunt in August. Just saying no at the end is enough. You don't have to submit on information for each species for, you know, months that you didn't harvest. It's just you know, when you did harvest, we're looking for that information at the monthly level.
So again, I can put anything in here. If I wanted to report on a monthly level, I would put if I had 3 different reports I wanted to do for March, I could put 3 for March. I could put 5 for August. There could be none for June or none for July, whatever it is. However you choose to report is fine. But if you do no trapping at all through the trapping license year, then you can submit 1 no report. But when you do any trapping, you must have at least 1 of these harvest rows if it's a harvest.
So then if we don't harvest in June, but we did report in May, we're still legitimate. We don't have to come back and report 0 for June. Like we can, if we make a report in April or May or February and we don't trap after that, we don't have to come back and say, no, we didn't trap. We can, that's kind of assumed you reported it and you're covered.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. So another question here, it says, today there's 2 separate reporting lines with parks, 1 to front counter and 1 to parks. Is this new system, there only 1 report to require both, satisfy both departments?
The intention is that the information is being collected for parks so it should satisfy. If they required information, they would contact Sarah and Parks would contact Sarah and Caitlin, and we would be able to pull the park information through reporting.
Okay. Same person had a question, being an Alberta resident, I guess, is it okay or no issues with an Alberta resident obtaining their FWID, Fish Wildlife ID?
Yep, there's no problem with that. There's a couple additional steps, or not additional steps, but different steps, because the system does differentiate between BC residents, Canadian residents, and non-residents, but there's no problem with anyone from outside the province getting it.
Okay. Next question, if they do a paper report, will the paper report show up here at the end of the season or by the next season or whatever?
Yes, all reports received by paper will be entered into the system, so they'll show up there.
They will be on your profile and you would be able to see them in the reports option menu. You would see what's entered by paper here.
Okay. Next question, is there an expectation that you report for every month, or is it okay to enter one line per species for the season?
The month is needed. You can submit one report at the end of the season that includes, you know, a row for each month rather than submit a monthly report, but the month is still required so that we can capture the, you know, temporal nature of harvest.
And just for anybody too that has asked these questions, if it doesn't answer your question or whatever, then please feel free to put another comment or question, and I can call on you to ask more questions or explain further if you like. The next question I have here, if I trap my own registered trap line as well as on a friend's with, of course, their letter of permission, do you report the harvest on my friend's line, or do the owner of the trap line make that harvest report?
You would report anything that you trapped. So if it was you that trapped something on somebody else's trap line, you do report that under yours. We don't want any double reporting though, or duplicate reporting. Otherwise, we're going to have some inaccurate data. So just, I guess in that case, if there's a bit of uncertainty on who, you know, trapped it, make sure that it's only being reported once. But it is about who did the trapping and less about whose trap line it was.
Okay. Next question, can we delete or make corrections to reports that we have a mistake that was submitted already?
Unfortunately not. There's no way to edit a report from the public side of things, from your FRID profile once it's been submitted, but you can contact Front Counter and they will let us know and we'll make that correction on our end, and you'll see the updated report from your profile.
I guess further to that, if it was a mistake in terms of you underreported, I'm sure you could just make a separate report for that same month and species again. So you would have two reports saying you caught 2 and 1. I'm assuming that would be okay. But if it was an over harvest mistake, then you'd have to contact.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Does nuisance trapping get recorded here too? So I think that's you know, specifically to a wildlife permit for wildlife permit trapping.
If it's under a nuisance wildlife permit, then no, that would be reported separately, kind of under the reporting requirements. If it's trapping, you know, if it's incidental or you know, whatever species you were looking to trap, that would get reported under this program. I'm not sure if that makes sense. So if you need clarification, let me know.
I think it makes sense to me, but you know, Roland can ask again or put up his hand and I can call on him. But yes, I think it's if it's done under a nuisance permit, not on this system, but if it's nuisance just under your license under a regular trapping season, then yes, it gets reported.
Exactly.
Next question is maybe just explain the process if you have multiple trappers trapping in the same trap line.
I might pass that over or let someone else on my team elaborate, but it's whoever, similar to the other question, it's whoever traps the animal would be reporting it. And if it's unclear, you know, multiple people are out at the same time, just kind of decide which one of you will be reporting it. this isn't, you know, we're not looking to use this necessarily as any kind of compliance tool. We're just trying to monitor harvest. So it's more important that it gets reported, and in those types of situations, I think it can be a bit of judgment exercise, but it is, yeah, whoever takes the animal, I hope that helps. Again, sorry, I'm not sure if I was super clear.
Yeah, no, I think that's, yes, if you're trapping together, somebody has to figure out who's going to do the reporting. If you're trapping separate parts of the line, then whoever's doing the trapping would report under that, under their license, but against that trap line. And yeah, if you're alternating days who's doing trapping and checking, then maybe you come up with saying, yeah, whichever day you do the trap checking and stuff is the one who reports it at that time.
Yes.
Okay, next one. Okay, so one he's asking here, he said you've phrased it poorly. You can't see his commercial license showing on his profile. How does he get his commercial license to show on his Fish Wildlife ID?
Okay, so yeah, it mustn't have been entered yet. And that might be something that I can follow up with front counter on to make sure it gets put in there. So if you could, I guess I can take down your name and I can look into that and get back to you and make sure it gets up there.
Okay, so that was for Ian. So Ian, if you want to maybe put your name and telephone number and email in the chat box, we can get that over to them for you. Is the plan to eliminate paper reporting altogether, or will it continue to be an option in the future?
At this point, it will continue to be an option. We don't want to make it onerous for anyone to be able to, you know, fulfill the requirements of this report. Having said that, we encourage people to use the online system, but we will continue with the paper.
Next question is, who views this information? Is this available to the general public?
No, this information can only be viewed by internal wildlife staff and by the Fish and Wildlife ID holder, the trapper, who has submitted the report. It, you know, in kind of the raw reported form will not be shared widely. It may be summarized into you know, reports to be used for wildlife management, but any kind of personal identifiers or anything like that will be removed at that point.
Okay, another question here. I have a current Fish Wildlife ID for hunting. Will my trapping info be transferred over, or do I have to enter all my license and certificate info?
And it's the same Fish and Wildlife ID. So we internally will be adding that trapping license info to your profile. If there is anybody that thinks they should have one on there and can't see it under the commercial licenses, please reach out. I can put my email in the chat and we can figure out what's going wrong there to make sure that they're all visible to whoever has a license.
Okay.
If you can't see it, also check history, the little show history link, just in case. Click the show history link and see if it's in the commercial license history pane.
And I think a couple of people have kind of commented that if you click the commercial permits to apply, like that actually doesn't show up unless you have those credentials with a trapping license, does it?
You can't apply for a trapping license anywhere in the public's in the wild system at this time, right? You can only sorry.
like to actually report, like the clicking on the trapping reports, will
Yep.
that actually show up for a hunter?
No, that will only show up if,
They have a trapping license on their profile.
Okay. So, yes, I think there is one person who's commented saying he can't see that, which means his license is not in the system, right? So it doesn't recognize he has a license, so it won't allow him to report.
Okay.
Next question, if I don't trap for several years, will that be a problem and would my license get pulled? So yes, that's you. If you have a trapping license and you don't trap, you at least have to report a zero harvest to keep your license valid or to be eligible for license in the future years, to at least put in that you didn't trap that year and didn't capture anything. Is there a link to pay royalties tied to compulsory reporting?
there is not in Wild. The compulsory reports are not in the system, and reports are not, or royalties are not tied to this trapping harvest report. So the royalty reports are still required, and the royalty payment process is still the same.
Okay, another question. Do we submit our nuisance permit animals with this report? So yes, I think you covered that earlier, but maybe he didn't hear that. So I'll let you maybe say that one again.
Yeah, so if the nuisance trapping is occurring under a wildlife permit, not under a trapping license, then no, those nuisance animals would not be reported on this report. It would be reported under the separate permit requirements.
Okay. Another question, do we have to report each individual species for every month you trap that species? And the way I'm interpreting our question, yes, if you caught beaver in November, December, and January, you have to report the beaver you caught in each of the 3 different months. So you do have to report each species per month.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this one's different. It might be a Jared answer here. So Suzette says, when I applied for my trapping certificate, they refused to give it to me as I had to have a trap line. They had to say where I was trapping on my private property in the Okanagan. They assigned a trap line number to my private property. Would I claim that as a trap line or a private property?
So that would be considered private property. I do know that in some regions, or maybe most regions, the front counter BC licensing staff do assign private property trap line numbers, but we're not tracking those in the system. So if you're trapping on private property or private property trap line, when you're reporting, you would just call it private property. If you're trapping on a registered trap line, that's where you would enter the registered trap line number. The other part of that question, the first part, I don't quite remember, but I'm hoping that answered it.
And I don't think if you actually look at your license specifically, Suzette, you probably don't have a trap line number starting with the TR. Trap line numbers start with TR and a region number, but you probably have been given a private property number, private property license number, not an actual trap line number. You can always email a copy of your license to me to clarify, or I can clarify it with Jared, but probably it's not an actual real trap line number. It's just a private property number that you've been given. Okay. I and my partner are assistant trappers on a registered trap line. Do the same requirements apply to us? Are our reports on the main trap line? If I enter our catch, does my partner need to fill in a report? So Yeah, Ted, yes, you still have to report if you're the one doing the trapping, and with your license, then you report it on the trap line, and you and your partner just need to, you know, come up with an agreement that either you split your catch and each report part of it, or one of you reports it. And if one only reports it, then of course the other person just has to report a zero harvest, but you either split it however you choose, or one report the full catch and the other one just report no harvest. But you as the license holder report your catch on the trap line. Another question here, why is the province collecting harvest by month opposed to by the season?
So we are collecting it at the month level just so that we can have an idea of harvest distribution throughout the season and throughout the year to help inform some management decisions. Jared, I'm not sure if you have any additional background to provide on that one.
No, that's exactly it. Yeah, I mean, the biologists that look at this data are you know, always keen for getting as specific data as possible. But you know, I understand that reporting by species and by month may be a bit onerous. So we may need to look at that in the future. But for now, yes, it's reporting by month.
Thanks, Jared. Next question, many trap lines are not actively trapped each year across the province. It's been many years since these lines have come up for sale. Will this harvest reporting mechanism be used to track inactive lines? Will these come up for sale? So yes, we will. You know, that was one of the main pushes when the BCTA asked government to look at this and go down this road of trying to ask for harvest records, was to get a better capture of which trap lines are active. Whether or not we will be able to get down to that road of getting them active and getting them out for sale, I'll maybe pass that to Jared if you have any thoughts on that, Jared.
Oh, sorry, Tim, my audio just cut out. I just heard my name right at the end there.
Is there any, you know, plans in the future that this data, you know, helps identify the inactive trap lines and getting them up for sale? Is there any discussions around that front been happening yet?
Not to my knowledge, but certainly something we can consider going forward and seeing how that fits into the larger sort of trapping management issues that we need to tackle.
Okay, and I mean, from the BCTA perspective, that is something we have pushed hard for, and we hope that this is a means to help us get to that. So the BCTA has advocated for that, and hopefully we can use this as a tool to make it down that road a little bit more in the future here.
Certainly, great.
Next question is, do we need to include harvest report for animals that were caught and were not usable? Example, a lynx that was caught and was consumed by another animal before we're able to get to the trap.
Yes, it would. If the animal was caught in the trap, it would be reported here.
Next one, will this reporting system ever include the payment of fur royalties at the same time if payment is required?
We don't, it's not in our, you know, on the immediate horizon. That would, because we're under this report, we're collecting information on all animals trapped, and not all animals may require a royalty. It's something that, you know, we would have to expand the report a bit. I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but it's not something that's kind of on the immediate horizon.
Okay, next question comes from Jerry, out of season nuisance trapping. So yes, Jerry, it was clarified that if you have a nuisance permit, so if you're trapping under permit, it's not reported under this system. You still have to report under your trapping permit. Only anything that is taken, if it's considered nuisance under just your license without an actual nuisance permit, then you would report it here. But if you hold a damage control wildlife permit, you still have to report under that system and not through this one. And then another good question from Jerry. I'm almost going to say this is maybe the best question I've seen so far today. If we go back to those harvest reports, are black bear on there? So black bears that we harvest under our trapping license, is that reported here as well?
That is a
I-
good question.
I think, yes, I believe Black Bear is there. I'll just quickly take a quick look.
Yes, okay, there it is. So that answers your question, Jerry. Yes, black bear are reported here if you're taking it under your license. Next question, is there a biological region for collecting trap or harvest by month? Well, I think we've answered that with the biologist looking for this information. And asked actually if they could reintroduce Jared as to Jared's title and position.
Yes, Jared is right now the acting manager of the wildlife management section in the Wildlife and Habitat branch. And previously, previous to this acting role, he was the small game specialist in the branch, as well as having many other years of experience in the wildlife department. Anything to add, Jared?
No, thanks. That's it.
Okay, next, there's a comment here. I'm assisting with some Lynx DNA research in the South Central BC to assess connectivity of populations. So if you have hair or tissue from your harvest and want to know who your trapped lynx might be related to, please contact him. And his number, Al Pete, is in the information here. So another good study going on there. Thanks, Al. At the end of the trapping year, will the harvest summary be open to the public?
Eventually, I think so. There's a pretty big push to publish our summary data to our webpage and to the Data BC website so that it's publicly available. Again, like I said, it would be at a summary level without any personal information, but that information will be made publicly available at some point.
Okay, and we have another. Would the harvest numbers for a specific trap line be made available to anyone requesting it through a Freedom of Information request?
Probably. It would need to go through the Freedom of Information, group, and they do a review depending on the nature of the request and the information being requested. They make that determination. So it may be available, but it's very dependent on the type of the request and the specific information being requested.
As this is a transition year to implement new reporting requirements, there may be some inconsistency between recordable harvest for the season first held over from the previous season sold in the season. So is it recognized there may be higher first solds tracked by royalties versus those paid? So yes, Michael, that's kind of recognized. And just to clarify for people, if you didn't harvest it this season, then you don't report it. So if you have stuff in your freezer that you're shipping to market, you don't report it this year. You just report what you caught during this coming season. And in the future, the same thing. You report when you caught it, not when you ship it to market. The two are not going to be tied together. We understand there'll be differences in those numbers, and that's we're looking for the harvest data here, and it's not tied to when it actually gets sold at market. So you report it when you catch it, not when you ship it to market. How do you foresee this data to inform management decisions?
So right now, there isn't a lot of harvest data available, at the time of harvest, like we're collecting through this report. Similar to the previous question, or links to the previous question. The current, royalty information and fur trader information doesn't necessarily represent, how much is being harvested for a specific period of time. So this is definitely going to inform that. We can use this information to estimate, general population trends, if it's going up or down. We may be able to use this information to look at harvest rates. So that's the type of, decision-making processes that this data will be used to inform. Jared, if you have any further examples or details.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, the data we get on the whole suite of fur bearers largely comes from secondhand sources, be it royalties or fur trader reports, right? And they can be, delayed depending on fur markets and that sort of stuff. And this will allow us to get better, quicker, firsthand information, as well as information that we may not be seeing now, such as, I don't have a clue what gets trapped but not sent into the fur market. So asking the question about sort of what you trap and maybe showing what maybe didn't get to the fur market gives us a better sense of what's going on out there. So I think it's going to be more timely and more complete data through the system for sure.
And I will maybe make this as a last call for questions. We're down to our last question here. So we'll make a last call. If there's one or two more questions, we can probably get to them and we'll call it an evening. So yes, and I think there is another kind of piece of this. Would maybe this information be help making decisions in terms of the grant dollars or where money is allocated? And I think, yes, that's probably correctly true in terms of, yes, if we see a downturn in a certain species or a trend we don't like, that would help give us information to back up where some money should be spent. And last question here then is, how will you inform a trapper their harvest report has not been submitted? And I guess also maybe to that, is there a plan to maybe send an email, for those people who are got their systems and have emails, to give them a reminder to submit their reports once the season is coming close to an end?
Oh, go ahead, Elle.
Yeah, the plan, especially for this season and next season, is to email out, and we'll kind of check around July to see who hasn't submitted a report at all yet, and then we'll send out reminder emails, and we'll go from there. And yeah, we're trying to make sure that this will roll out in a way that we don't want it to be something that end of July people are kind of panicking to get it in.
Yes, thank you. One other comment come in, and that's just kind of the central interior. It's important to realize that some entire trap lines have been destroyed by forest activities, maybe quite a few with no trap or no harvest to report. So yes, we can agree with that. Same with some of the areas that were heavily impacted by fire, but still, if you hold a trapping license, you still have to just report no harvest. And that might be a recommendation for the future too. If people are reporting no harvest, we could maybe ask for a little piece of data as to why there was no harvest, i.e. severe events, weather events, or severe no trappable country or something like that might be a good possible future change for more input. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I will say thank you for your time. We appreciate your time.